All right. Well, hello. I'm Jim Morgan. I'm with Fisher's Historical Society. Tonight we have Dr. Bill Sauter and Dr. Chuck Sadler. Is that correct on both? I do that right.
We're
Um,
good.
who
Yes.
are our early dentists in Fishers as Fishers was growing and becoming a viable community. They started taking care of the people's teeth there. So I'll let you guys introduce yourself. Bill, why don't you tell us who you are, introduce yourself, and then we'll go over to Chuck on that. So,
Yeah, Bill Sauter. We've been living here the last 30 plus years up here at 131st in Allisonville. We moved to Fishers in 86 and started a practice. And yeah, we just couldn't have found a better community to start all over here. And it's been great. Just, the business is great. Just a great place to raise kids. And yeah, can't Can't say much, better. It's, couldn't have landed to a better place.
Chuck, why don't you introduce yourself? Are you guys getting that feedback?
So
I'm getting some kind of weird feedback on mine.
Mine sounds good.
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead, Chuck.
you know, we got married in 1987 and moved to Fishers in 1987 into, of all places, Sun Blessed Apartments, which is right close to Bill's first office there. So I was in dental school for 6 years, 87 to 93, and I saw his office. Didn't they used to call it like almost looked like a log cabin, but
Everybody called it the log cabin. Yep.
right right next to the Shell gas station there. And so we moved to Fishers early, but I didn't start my practice there till 1994. But brought our family here and been in Fishers the whole time, so we kind of saw it grow, kind of like Bill did. But 6 of those years I was in dental school, and I just knew of Bill and of his practice because I drive by it on my way to dental school for 6 years there. But yeah, we've been blessed. Still live in Fishers, and we love it there. One little tidbit: we moved into Bill's neighborhood right there at 131st in Allisonville.
That's
So
right.
we were neighbors for about 7 years, 8 years there, and we really enjoyed it. You got to see all the fireworks at Conner Prairie on the 4th of July, and we loved our house there and loved being neighbors with Bill back in the day.
Well, that's great. Well, guys, the Fishers Historical Society, what we try to do is we're trying to bring some of Fishers to life to people because this town has grown so rapidly, very few people have really got much roots here, and so it's trying to go
Yeah.
back and kind of tell what's kind of happened. The very first one of these we did, I didn't realize how interesting it was going to be, but we had Phil Cowie, who was the first paid full-time fire chief, and he's one that took him from a volunteer to a full-time department. And so he was giving his timelines when he moved to Fishers to take that job was 1979. Okay, just a little bit
Wow.
before you.
Okay.
And he said at that time there were 1,000 people in Fishers. Okay, when he first moved there. Okay, and when he left in the late 80s, there were 11,000. Okay, so and now I was born in Fishers, and when I was there was 300 people. So it's kind of changed. I think the last census is what 150,000 or something along that line. So
Yeah.
because there aren't a whole lot of people that have that deep of stories into the stuff. Bill, you were talking about how you came here. Why don't you kind of give us, some of the story you were telling me, kind of go back again, how you got to Fishers and what your process was.
Well, I graduated from dental school in 78 and signed up with the National Health Service Corps. They placed dentists in rural healthcare settings. Some of them were placed on Indian reservations, but we took a position, little rural town up in Wisconsin, about 750 people. We had an 80-acre farm. I loved it. It was great. But after about 8 years, after 3 kids, my wife is the oldest of 6 kids, and she grew up in Lawrence, and I grew up in 56 in Allisonville, right down the road. And she said she was ready to move back. She would like me to come with her, but she was coming back. So I decided to come back. We started looking around, and we just kind of acclimated to the north side of Indy. And I went out to the IU School of Business to look up statistics, and a librarian came over and asked me what could he help me with, and I told him I was, I was looking between over in Avon, the west side, and up here on the north side, and they were both growing pretty quick. But the guy says, fissures, I can give you these stats. By the time the ink is dry, they're going to be outdated. I go, whoa, that's, So I drove on up here, looked around it a little bit more, um, started asking questions. Someone sent me over to Ken Thompson, because Ken Thompson at that time was Mr. Fishers.
He owned it.
And I think he was doing all the Sunblast, a lot of different developments. He owned half of Fishers, I think. And I walked in his office, got to speak to him, and he told me he would rent me a spot where the new Kroger is. It used to be Marsh, and that wasn't even built yet. I said, well, I need something sooner. And he mentioned to go look at the old church. It was Christ Community Church. It used to be the Fisher's Masonic Lodge. And I drove by, and I said, sure enough, it has a for sale sign. So I called Wilbur Sutton. He was the Patterson Dental representative. He kind of drew all the plans for dental offices. He sold the big equipment and stuff. And we got in, looked at the building, and Wilbur said, man, this would be great. There's no interior partitions to tear down, and we could do a nice little office there. We talked to the members of the church board, and they came down about 20 grand off of their asking price. They even offered to finance me at a dirt low rate. I mean, it was an offer too good to pass up. So we bought it. I helped do a lot of the demo on it and remodeling it. And it was funny, different people, old Masonic Lodge members would come in there and look at the place. What are you doing to our building? Wanted to know. I said, well, I'm making a demo office and this and that. And they all everybody pointed out one spot in the building on the east side between two big windows. That used to be I don't know what you call the crown or throne where the boss get to sit there or something. And it was great. Fishers did not have a zip code. Well, they had a zip code, but didn't have any mail delivery at that time. If I wanted mail delivered to my office, I would have had to have a Noblesville 46060 address. Well, I didn't want that listed in the phone books or any of my business cards. So for a couple years, we just had a PO box in Fishers for our address, just so we could get mail delivered, having a listing, with that. And
Well, the little post office just down the street, though, so it was bad.
At lunchtime, I would walk down there to the street. You would get lunch at Archer's. You'd line up behind all the contractors and their muddy boots and everything, get a nice lunch, and we'd bring the mail back. And it was scary at first. Didn't have many patients, starting from scratch. And my first payment on the loan came due from A&B Bank right across the street. And I borrowed the money from them. They gave me a line of credit and to do the remodeling on it, buy my equipment. And the first loan, I didn't have money enough to make the first payment. Oh man, I walked back over there, tail between my legs, embarrassed as heck to talk to the manager. Steve Sturdivant. Yeah, that's who I think it was. Yeah. And no problem. We'll just loan you money for the payment. I said, you can loan money for payments? He says, we can loan money for anything. And basically at that time, it was just a handshake. And from then on, it was good. Fisher's been great. They're young. Everybody had teeth, they needed a dentist. So things just grew and grew.
Well, that's exciting. Now you said you used to ride horses from 52nd and Nelsonville up to Fisher.
I had a friend that lived about a block south of 56 in Allisonville on the east side, and you wouldn't know it, but he had a couple acres and they had 3 horses. And we would ride, a lot of times we would just ride bareback. We'd go right up the middle of the median on 37 to 116th Street, cross over to Archer's, get a can of pop, ride the horses right back down Allisonville. And Yeah. Couple
When you
times.
were, was that in high school, Bill? Was that when you were in high school?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow.
Uh-huh. So, I mean, that was, yeah, I haven't seen any horses on 37 since then, really, but
Now, are you talking about 37 or old or new 30 or old 37?
old 37.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yep.
Allisonville. Yeah. So, I'm
Well,
old
no,
enough to know that there was, the old
no,
37. Yeah.
I'm talking about, okay, new 37. That's
Okay.
like it is all the way up to Castleton, but then it used
Okay.
to extend all the way up, further. And I remember one time we were going up there and the horse spooked a covey of quail. The horse ruled up. We were riding double bareback, and the guy in the front fell off. And I was just holding on to that mane for my dear life. And it was the horse was crisscrossing across the highway. And finally it slipped on the pavement and rolled over. And I luckily got off unscathed.
Well, that's great. Well, that old building. What is? I remember where that building sat, but things have moved around on me. Because like for instance, the Mac Reynolds place is gone. It's out that strip center. The old Reynolds.
Yep.
My grandfather was a 33 degree Mason, so he was in that building for years. But what's there now? I know the Shell's across the
Okay.
street from it.
You had Lantern Road, and right next to Lantern Road was a 7-Eleven. And then there was my office, and then there was the Shell station. I
Yeah.
got bought out by Shell. They wanted the land. They were gonna, I called all that big area back there where Target is right now, that had for sale sign. And curiosity, I called up, and there was some lawyer in Ohio or something. And I asked them, was interested, and they wouldn't sell any little partial of it at all. It was all or nothing. I think, back then they said I could buy that, 60 acres or whatever it was for $600,000. Oh man, that was no way could I even think of that big of numbers. But yeah, now it's probably worth 600 million. I don't know. But
Probably.
the story is there. It was great. I would walk over to the village pantry. The lady made a turkey and cheese sandwich for me every day, but she hid a fresh one behind the counter for me. And she, got my lunch there every day, and then walked down to get the post office, get the mail. And people from Shell, they wanted to start developing that back there. So Shell people came over one day, a bunch of lawyers in three-piece suits, and took me out to lunch. And they made an offer to me. They said, we want to buy your property, and we'll give you a new piece of grass, a little piece of land, a little bit bigger, back there in our development. And I said, and what? What else? It's, no, nothing. Just this new piece of land. It's a little bit bigger. And I said, you mean I'm going to give up my existing building, my frontage on 116th Street to you, and trade for just a little piece of dirt back there on the side? And I literally walked out of it there. And my next patient that afternoon was Mike McCown. He was a realtor
Right.
down
Michael should be.
yeah. And his office was down in Castleton at the time. And I just got talking to him, and he says, well, keep me in mind. I would like to move an office up to Fisher's. And so I says, so we started talking, and to Shell, and their offer definitely increased. Then one day I had this one patient that Roger Hickenbacken. Do you remember that name? He had there was a little red brick on the north side of 116th Street, right where my office is now, just kind of right in front of the post office there. He had a little one-story. He did a lawnmower repair shop, and he sold lawnmowers and stuff and would fix lawnmowers. And I one time told him, I says, Roger, I'm going to eventually outgrow this spot, because I only had like 8 or 9 parking spots, and I had a staff of 5. and didn't leave much. And, you know, so Roger one day calls, he left a message on my voice message machine. Yeah, that's before you had, and he said, "Hey, Doc, give me a call. You know, I think I'm ready to sell." But he didn't leave a name. And I could recognize the name. About 2 weeks later, all of a sudden it hit me. I remember that name now. I went down there, you know, talked to him. He was interested in selling. And Mike McCown, being the realtor, I said, Mike, yeah, that's more space than I need. Yeah, let's go. You go talk to him, work out some deals, and I'll split that property with you. And so Mike did all the arrangement and everything, and we ended up building 2 new buildings, the exact same footprint, but his interior was different than mine. And we moved over there in '99, May of '99. We opened up, and I'll tell you, when I got into that new office, I don't know why, maybe just a newer building or something. Maybe it didn't look like a log cabin anymore, like Chuck said, but we were just swamped. And so I had a patient that I was doing a lot of dental treatment on, and he had to wait a long time um, in between visits, and because I was just so booked up. And he says, Doc, you ought to. He was babysitting um, uh, a family, another dentist, um, Greg Ryan, and Greg was driving up to Lafayette every day to work. And he says, man, I'm watching their kids in the morning. Well, they go, his wife was a school teacher here in HSE, but he's got to drive all the way to Lafayette to take care of patients. You need to bring him in here. So the guy kept bugging me every time. Have you talked to Greg? I said, no. So finally I called Greg one time. We went out to lunch. We worked out a deal. And so we opened in May. I think by October, I brought Greg into the office as an associate. And it just grew.
Well, you were in. I mean, Fisher's one of the whole theme of what's going on tonight. It's been for years. It's one of the fastest growing cities in the country. Okay, so
Yes.
it was on fire. I mean, I was in the real estate side of it. So you were talking about Ken Thompson. I knew Ken well, and my dad he became a commercial broker because he was a farmer, and he also was real estate, so he could speak to both parties in their language. And so, as a kid, I used to hang out in Ken Thompson's office all the time, and Ralph Wilfong's and Carmel, the two guys that kind of built those two towns. And you were talking about Ken being king. The town was so overwhelmed with the growth that they didn't know what to do with Sunblast and all of it. They didn't know what to do about sewers. So Ken went ahead and put the water and sewer companies in on his dime, but that means that he could control any development that goes on. Because if you wanted water or sewer, you had to go through King, Thompson. So, but it worked well. So
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So now, when did you get here?
Myself?
Yeah, Chuck. Yeah, Chuck. When did you get here?
Well, I can segue a lot of what Bill said, but I'll start with we got married in 1987, and I started dental school downtown Indianapolis. We're both from Newcastle, Indiana, which is a little east of here, 45 minutes, which was
pretty good basketball gym.
Wait, what's that?
I said I had a really nice basketball gym.
Oh yeah, our gym was pretty good, and it was a little bit bigger than Fisher's at the time. But anyways, so I started dental school downtown Indianapolis, and when we were getting ready to get married, they're like, well, most of the dental students would live closer down towards Indianapolis, but my wife took a job at Ball Memorial Hospital, and starving kids right out of college and going to dental school, not making any money. My wife needed this job at Ball Memorial, and we ended up at this little town called Fisher, right? And moved into Sunblessed Apartments. And like I said, Sunblessed Apartments, we were there probably 5 years. And of course, drive by Bill's office all the time. And that's how we ended up in Fisher. Most of my buddies in dental school were like, where's Fisher's? I go, it's on the northeast side, just east of Carmel, whatever. And as my buddies came up and started seeing it, it was like, wow, Sunblessed Apartments at the time was pretty new. And of course, at the time, we only had Archers, at least to my memory, when we moved in. It was just Archers. We go down to Archers. And then back to Bill's thing, I saw such growth here for 6 years being in dental school. I saw all the growth, so I knew I wanted to set up my orthodontic practice here. And down the road, speaking of Ken Thompson, one of my partners and good friends is Corby Thompson, his
Yeah.
son. And I was part of the Rotary Club, and you get to know people in Rotary and Fishers, and it just kept growing and growing. And luckily, I started my practice at 116th in Allisonville. Right now, there's no building there. They took it down during COVID. So if you look at the southeast corner of 116th in Allisonville, of course, Sam's was across the street. Classic place. I would go to eat there a lot. And Sam's behind me, which is now the Roost. Eat breakfast there. You had two Sam's to choose from. Um, it was just perfect for me because I had this little cracker box that I was in for 5 years. And then Corby Thompson, back to the Ken Thompson thing. Corby and I were friends in Rotary. He's like, hey, Chuck, I'm getting ready to put a building next to our building. And so we went behind, at that time was Marsh, behind the Marsh. And we put a building in there next to the other Ken Thompson building. So now there's 4 back there. And truly was blessed because you get to know people in Rotary, and those are some of the movers and shakers and fishers. And luckily I hooked up with Corby early. Also got to know a couple other dentists through Rotary, and got to know Bill. And then back to another segment, he said, Greg Ryan, long story short, one of his sons is my partner. The other son is now in Bill's office there, and that's another story here in this. But I knew Greg, and I knew Greg's dad actually. Greg's dad was one of my instructors at the dental school, and so I knew Greg when he went in with Bill, and I was like, that's a really good pairing. A little story about Greg is he his dad was a dentist. He was a PE teacher, and I think he was one of Bobby Knight's one of the managers for Bobby Knight. But
Yeah.
he decided to be a PE teacher for a while, and he got married to Diane, and they were living in Fishers, and both teachers. And then he was one of those guys who then went back to dental school later in life, and went through that struggle probably of not having income and going to dental school. Then, long story short, one of his sons is now my partner, which is pretty cool. So it's tying in with Bill's story, the Thompson and the Ryans, and it's been a good journey for sure.
Well, I was going to say, Bill, you were talking about you were on the original, like, uh, uh, or an early chamber group or whatever, and you were dropping some names there that were kind of some of the players of Fishers for quite some time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we started, it was called it had a long name. We thought of, trying to start a business group, Fisher Chamber of Commerce. And we called it, what was it? Fishers United Business Community Support Group or something like that. And it was a really long name, but there was Steve Sharp, Sturtman, yep, and Gary Reynolds, and Steve Sharp, Gary Reynolds. Oh, Ron Archer,
Mm-hmm.
and so I mean, they all pretty much were patient. We just got talking, and we had, where do we have meetings? I think we had the meetings maybe over at a room in the bank or something, and Ron would bring lunch or something, and so I mean, and we just started thinking of different things, and it just grew and grew, and now there's over 300 members, and I don't know where they meet now. They were focused on businesses and so forth. To grow my practice, I wanted to focus on, okay, I focused on the moms, getting the moms to know me. The mom is the one who goes and makes the dental appointment for the
Right.
kids and herself, and most likely for the spouse, and gets to say everything. So I mean, we had 4 kids here, and I ended up coaching soccer leagues and softballs and baseballs, and there were millions of shirts running around of Fisher's Family Dentistry on the back of them. And I ran around. I introduced myself to all the different specialists. I'd knock on the doctor's doors and the pharmacist, just introduce myself. Hey, I'm here in Fisher's. Here's my card. You know, if anybody needs a dentist, I'd love to take care of them there. And,
Yeah, I would imagine much before you. I know myself when I was a kid, we used to have to go all the way downtown to the dentist. So it
yeah.
was, down on the almost on the circle. So that was we'd get on the bus and go down there. So
Mm-hmm.
Well, in the Rotary Club, Walter Sharp, Steve Sharp's son,
Yeah.
was in Rotary, and I mean, I pretty much use them for all my printing. Go down there. Of course, that's now where all that stuff's built up right around the Monon Trail there. But got to know the Sharps pretty well. Still go to Sharp printing.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a lot of Rotary connections throughout Fishers that really still are part of my core group still to this day.
well, what's funny is Walter's mom, long before she was a sharp, was our babysitter. So
Wow. Wow.
so
That goes back.
yeah, so it all kind of comes. It was a small town, right? So it's not so much anymore, but it was. It was a very different culture, very different feel. I try to explain to people that to try to make them understand what Fishers was like back in the day. Have you ever seen? It's an old movie. It's an '80s movie. It was called Doc Hollywood with Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
That was Fishers, where that little town was. That was pretty much the town I grew up in. So we used to close down 116th Street and have fish fries on it, and they'd have, it was movie screens going up. It was the same
Yeah.
thing.
Oh yeah, the fish fry every Friday night during the summer over at the Methodist Church. That was packed over there.
Yeah.
We'd go over there every Friday night. And
Isn't it crazy? Isn't it crazy that the Methodist Church is still right there in the mix of all the growth that's gone on? It's still there.
Yeah.
I wonder if they still have those fish fries. I don't know.
I am amazed at how many churches there are in Fishers.
Yeah.
I don't know if everyone's ever counted. There's more churches than the dental offices now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Way more.
Mm-hmm. But no, yeah.
So
Well,
when you first came into town, you said there might have been another dentist before, Bill.
Yeah,
You,
Dave Smith. He was right there next to you in your original office there, wasn't he, Chuck?
yeah, Dave Smith. I thought you were there before Dave, but I could be wrong.
I mean, right about the same time, yeah. But I don't. I mean, I don't know if Dave really ever got involved in the community or anything there. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, he was nice
well,
enough.
I think that for a long time, most people from Fishers had to go to Noblesville or Indy or something, before you guys got there. So
Yeah.
Well, there was one more little story when I came here. I was scoping out. I mean, I'd lived here for 6 years during dental school and orthodontic residency. I kind of thought, this is the place where I want to go, but there wasn't any orthodontists here yet. And I knew at that point, John Kirkpatrick had moved in and some other people, and there it was starting to grow, but it wasn't like a no-brainer like people think nowadays. Like, oh, that was a no-brainer to come to Fishers. It wasn't.
it was a risk.
I even had 2 orthodontists, one in Castleton, two guys that were two or three of my mentors. It's like, no, you should not go to Fishers. And the first couple months, when I set out my shingle from scratch, because I'm sure that's what you did, Bill. People don't do it anymore, but you just start your practice from scratch, and you have 0 patients, and you are basically living on a line of credit, and it's scary. And I didn't, like Bill, not be able to make my first payment, but I had a line of credit to cover me. But I did develop shingles as a 28-year-old because I was so stressed. I was doing just like Bill. I probably wasn't as good as Bill. Bill's great with his hands. He's a good construction guy. He can do anything. But at the time, I thought I could. I did a lot of my own build out because I was trying to save money. But right before I put my shingle out, I literally got shingles. And I knew my mom had shingles. I thought it was something that older people got, you know. And and it was like, yeah, but if you're under a lot of stress, because I had this shingles all through my eye, I was worried, what is this thing? But it wasn't like a lot of people think, oh, that was a no-brainer for an orthodontist to set up from scratch. Nobody was here. And you didn't know. I mean, now in retrospect, it's like, yeah, that, or like that property Bill was talking about. You know, in retrospect, you go, man, I wish I'd have bought that or bought that piece of property. But you just, it wasn't a no brainer, and it was stressful at the time.
You know,
Do people
what,
even do that anymore? Start practices without buying out somebody else's practice, or does that still happen? Or
It's pretty rare. I know two orthodontists that have done it in the last 10 years, two young kids, one in Carmel and one in Greenwood. But it's pretty rare. You gotta have a lot of financials behind you, and you gotta have a know-how. And both of those guys are doing well, but it's pretty rare for an orthodontist to start from scratch. What about general dentist, Bill?
oh, I mean, a lot of them are going into the corporate dentistry, you know.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, it's nice. You've got a guaranteed paycheck, and the corporate, they'll put the business guy in the front office, and, you know, they'll hire staff and do this and all that, you know. What, I mean, I went through 8 years of college, you know, 8 years, 4 years of undergrad and 4 years of dental school. I never had a single business course in my life. And suddenly,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, back then you're a $500,000 in debt and you're hiring people. What do you look for? And this and that, and
Yeah.
managing checkbooks and account payable and this and that. And, um, I remember we having a pegboard, and when we got our first computer, man, that was sweet. You know,
Yeah.
what else could you want? You know, an interesting story. So I graduated in '78, practicing in a very rural setting in Wisconsin. I mean, it was poor dairy farmers,
Mhm.
and we the dentistry was so different up there than it is down here. You know, I did it. You know, there was no specialist, so
Mhm.
I did I did everything. You know,
Mhm.
nowadays down there, I mean, you talk about specialists. You look at dentistry. Okay, you think just this little mouth is a special area, but now we've got guys who do nothing but extractions, root canals. You know, orthodontists, and just all these different, you know, gum specialists and this and that. And so it was nice. I got to do it all, which was it's made my career more interesting. Never was boring, but you know, I did a ton of dentistry on kids up there. Just what the yeah, up there it was a lot assumed that you know mom and dad had bad teeth, so kid was going to have junior was going to have bad teeth too. So they never went to dentists. They didn't want to restore any baby tooth. They just wanted me to extract it and this and that. And so when I moved back and ordered all my supplies, I ordered all these things that I would do to do a lot of pediatric dentistry and yeah, all these different things. And yeah, I still had a lot of that these stainless steel crowns and different things. Chuck knows what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
I never, you know, for the 30 years I practiced there, I never even used up half of that initial supply of stuff. And
Yeah.
you know, everybody you got down here, oh, you know, you do extractions? No, you send all your extractions down to the oral surgeon. And I said, no, I mean, I can do that. That's,
Yeah.
it, yeah, it was fun. I mean, that helped, I think, the practice. But, you know, Chuck is talking about, I think just, you know, down here, oh, there was a lot of dental insurance. Nobody had dental. The farmers didn't have dental insurance up in Wisconsin. but
Yeah.
maybe just their health IQ, their dental IQ. Yeah, they knew that, you know, the difference initially was the dividing one was Highway 37 and Interstate 69. When I first started, that was all rural. That side, I kind of was doing the same kind of dentistry initially that I was up in Wisconsin, because that was all the farms. That was well water. They didn't have city water with fluoride in it. You can get to talking about removing fluoride, but that night and day difference what I would see with the kids who had fluoride from city water from what they didn't out in the rural areas. It wasn't because, you know, they ate better or they maybe brushed their teeth a little bit better, but you know, it was a whole different type of dentistry doing once I moved back here. And
You're right.
it was a lot more maintenance instead of just, you know, and preventive instead of just, you know, they'd see me once a year. The busiest time of the year up there always was right around this time. You know what time that would be right now in a place like Wisconsin? It's deer hunting season. All these guys suddenly would be out there in the cold, and all this cold, their teeth would start hurting. And so they would all be calling me right before deer season to want me to fix their teeth, you know, before they went out in the woods opening day, you know, right around Thanksgiving time, opening their deer season. And I'm say sorry, guys, but yeah, I'm a deer hunter too. I'm going to be out in the woods.
You allude to the two different fishers. You know, it really was more rural back in those days, and I think, you know, the mentality was really, and it scared me at first because I was like, I don't think a lot of these people want to get braces for their kids because they're like, oh, I never had braces, you know, or whatever. Is it just for cosmetics? And I was worried at first that mentality was going to hurt me, but you know, it just, as the growth kept coming, and you still had parents that wanted to, you know, they were good parents still, they wanted to do the right thing for their kids, but doing braces for their kids was a luxury, you know, and some of them, they really couldn't afford it, or they just didn't see the value in it.
Well, you know, I'm flashing back to my youth and going to my dentist was actually my uncle downtown, and so you know he was, and so he was actually my grandfather's brother-in-law, you know, type thing. But anyway, but oh my God, it was a very different world back then because there was all those belts and pulleys and stuff.
Yeah.
Those were not a lot of fun. It was kind of what
That goes back a couple of years.
it does. Yeah. So, and talk about the stainless steel crowns. Literally, I was, you know, I had just gotten my two front teeth in. I mean, just gotten them in, and I was doing a sled on my grandma's yard driveway, and I fell over, and the sled bar hit me in the mouth and knocked both of my front teeth out that I just got. And so he put stainless steel caps on those with, he'd smear some kind of white pasty crap on the front of them. And that's what I had to go through school with for a while. So, you know,
So did you have two stainless steel right there?
right here in the very front.
That probably affected you in third or fourth grade there for a little bit.
It was not much fun. I didn't like it. Well, right now, there's a reason I have this. Okay, this big Civil War looking goatee is my dog hit me in the mouth and broke my front tooth off. So now I have to go in on Friday to get a new post started on that one. But anyway, so I've got this thing kind of hiding it.
Because it looks good on you. It looks
Oh, thank
good.
you. So I'm looking forward to getting rid of it. But anyway, so it does work. It kind of hides it pretty well.
That's quite common. The dogs knocking people's front teeth, damaging them.
Yeah, yeah. So well, he heard his name, so he's, you know, it's a Doberman here. So this is him right here. But anyway, so but yeah. So but I flash back when talking about old dentistry. I'm sitting there thinking of the spit bowl and the belts and the smoke coming off of it, you know, that kind of stuff. So
You know, that's one thing when you talk about that, very interesting. Wilbur helped me go through that. When I was designing my office, the fee that they were going to charge me for it was major because, you know, you got charged by like each sink. They counted how many bathrooms you had. So you had a sink there. And then, okay, I had 4 chairs. So they said I had 4 more sinks. And then each chair, they were always thinking about the old spittoon, you'd spit into that kind of. So suddenly we had like 16 sinks, supposedly, according to them. And there was going to be a major charge for my sewer bill. And Wilbur, that was the existing rules in Fishers. And he got us to rewrite it. He helped me write letters and so forth, and we got it changed. And so then, well, no, we don't have the spitons anymore. We just suck all that stuff out. And, really, we don't want them having to, it takes too much time for them to sit up and spit and all that time. Yeah. And we don't really want that. So we just suck it all out. It goes to a vacuum cleaner. And we don't use much of the tap water. We have, a 1 liter bottle of sterilized water that we're using to spray in there. And, and so, I mean, it reduced my anticipated, sewer and water bill down to a fraction. And we got the laws rewritten in there.
And speaking of that, speaking of Bill or Wilbur, when I did set out my shingle, it's great to have somebody who knows what the heck they're doing and help you through the process. And Wilbur was one of those guys, and he just happened to be a longtime resident of Fishers, and of course he had helped Bill, and of course my relationship with Bill grew over the years, but my relationship with Wilbur really was instrumental in helping me make the right decisions. And then I was in that little cracker box at 116th and Allisonville for 5 years, and then I built this other one, just like Bill did. As soon as you built that bigger office, you all of a sudden your practice grows, and Wilbur helped me through that growing process, make the right decisions. And I think there was a similar issue like you had, Bill, but it was probably maybe down the road a little bit. And you're right, they were going to charge me per sink and all this other stuff, and it's like Wilbur was a godsend for me, and just so happens that he was part of what hooked this whole interview thing up today. That um, I just don't know how easy it would have been without Wilbur and his know-how and being a Fishers guy. And I give him a lot of credit for
Yes,
that.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, gentlemen, I've really enjoyed this. This has been a lot of fun. Is there anything that you, uh, from your experience of seeing Fishers go from where you started to where it is now, that you'd like to share that just from your perspective on that?
I'll let Bill go first.
Oh, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, you look in these business magazines, and how many times lately has Fishers been named the best place to raise a family, the safest city, and top 10 this, top 10 that, and they're doing everything right. I was kind of, I think it's turned out okay, but when they were wanting all those referendums going from Fishers, from a town to a city and so forth, I was kind of, I mean, just leave it like it is, guys. Why? Yeah, it's not broken, I don't think, but I think it's worked out good. And I just think, some of the leadership in town, it was interesting. I used to go to a lot of the town meetings and sit there and so forth, and was on a bunch of different committees. And one of the things I proposed was all these Sunblasts had great little sidewalks within each house, had to have a sidewalk, a concrete sidewalk. But once you get outside the neighborhood, how do we connect the neighborhoods? So I said, why don't we need some interconnecting pavements to connect all these little neighborhoods and so forth. And just, great. I love the old railroad track, the nickel plate trail now. We jump on our bikes, go over there, and we can ride all the way up to Potter's Bridge and back down to 96th Street. Now we could pretty soon go all the way downtown, I think. It's it's so neat going through downtown, just seeing all the people pushing strollers, on rollerblades, on bicycles, walking, and so forth. There, you know, I think they're doing, the right thing. I know, yeah, my yeah, my mother-in-law passed away about a year ago. I mean, she just thought they moved up here, in the 90s. They just thought, oh, this is terrible. It's getting too big. I mean, whoever thought Fishers would have all these parking garages now, and all that. But yeah, it's been a great place to, raise a family and have a business. And, I can't complain. We're still living right here in 131st and Nelsonville, and don't have any plans to change it.
Well, I agree with you, Bill. And I don't know how God works, but somehow I ended up here by accident, because my wife took that job in Ball Memorial. And you're right. I remember when Walt Kelly was he was the town, not mayor, but whatever they called it at the time, Walt Kelly.
Town planner or whatever. Yeah.
And some of
Yes.
the stuff, I agree with you, Bill. Like sometimes we're like, well, wait a minute, are we sure we should have all this? But I will say now I have kids living in Fishers, and I got friends living in Fishers that love what Fishers is all about now with the concerts downtown. And you see, like you're saying, you have the strollers and people going around. Yeah, occasionally you got to have to park in a parking garage. But I just think, where it's come, if I'd have seen that 25 years ago, I'd been on more on board with it back in the day. Because I agree with you, Bill. Like having those connecting, how you connect from neighborhood to neighborhood. If you're gonna, ride your bike down to Monon, you got to have connectivity. So I like where we are. It is pretty amazing that Bill and I ended up in this amazing town of Fishers, and it's blessed us beyond belief. We both have 4 kids who have, you know, benefited from this great community, and yeah, I'm just like Bill. I'm not now. I live in a different house than I did back when I was a neighbor of Bill's, but I'm not moving from Fishers. I love it too much, and now, we have a lot of amenities that we didn't have back in the day. But I sometimes refer back to the good old days when we used to drive down to Cub Foods because all we had was Archer.
Yes.
Right.
And now I got 3 or 4 Krogers to choose from, and a lot of Fresh Times. There's just so many options for grocery stores. But that Archer's, it when we first moved here, it just, and I know you interviewed him. I think you interviewed him, but when we walked into that, my wife and I looked at each other. It was like, this reminds us of our grocery store back in Newcastle, and we were so sad to see it go.
Now, were you guys here when Archer's was the
Yeah.
little carts and the little bitty
Yeah.
narrow? Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and that's the grocery store I'm referring to in Newcastle. We had one just like it. It smelled the same,
Yeah.
had the same smells, had the same feel, and it was
I love the old Archers when you'd walk down the board floors would give and you had the little
yeah,
bitty carts and the little bitty narrow aisles. Um, I think the frozen food was on the left, the butcher was in the back, that kind of stuff. One
yeah,
checkout.
that's
Yeah.
right.
How many times did the cows get loose and they take off, running down 116th Street?
Well, those
Yeah.
could have been my grandparents because, you were talking about going up the rail trail. The railroad track was to the west of my grandparents' farm. They went to 106 was the south. It went all the way across. Well, 37 cut it in half, then 69 cut it in half, and then it went over to Lantern Road. Then it went all the way up just south of 116th Street. So those little brick ranches that they've torn down to rebuild all that stuff, that my grandpa and Fred Appel developed that. So that was Morgan Meadows. And so people are always asking me if I'm upset that, all the tear downs of fish. No, not really. I mean, it's like I enjoy the memories. But the thing is, we have done things to improve the city too. It's not, don't hang on to things just to hang on to things. So
And just to bring in a little bit of the younger generation, all 4 of my kids, whenever their friends are back here in Fishers, I mean, you know, this younger generation, they're like, they see everything from the Top Golf to right where that one neighborhood was, not the one you were referring to, but the other neighborhood just east of the Methodist Church, and that
Yeah.
all that growth over there. And you know, when this young generation sees all that, they're like, wow, this is great, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's really gone to good use, and yeah, there are some good memories of the good old days, but sometimes you do have to progress with the times, and it's done well, you know.
They've done a good job with it. Well, gentlemen, thank you for coming and sharing with us. This was a lot of fun. So
I'm glad we can finally hook it up. I apologize.
Yeah.
We were both part of it.
well, we
Now
got
I
it
know
all
how
figured
to
out.
do.
It's all good. So this will be on our face. You know, I know you said you don't do Facebook. If you do Facebook, on our Facebook, Fishers Historical Society, this will be on there for about a month. The live video. Facebook now takes all the live stuff down after a month, so we put a YouTube up there later. You know, but anyway. So,
Okay.
well, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
for organizing it.
All right, it's good to meet you guys. Take care.
Yeah,
Tell
great.
Wilbur
Thanks.
thanks.
All right,
Thank you, guys.
he's on there. He hears you. Okay, so
Okay.
see you later. Bye
Oh,
bye.
that's good to know.
Bye.
Bye bye.